ladies and gentlemen, our humble listeners, welcome to episode 1 of You Didn't Catch That?
See, if you're gonna be
Today,
saying the title with that tone, you can't expect me to tone myself down.
absolutely true. In today's episode, I have the good fortune of being the presenter, and I have chosen to present The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, comic produced by Marvel Comics, and for the portions that we're reading today, written by Ryan North with art by Erica Henderson, colors by, I believe, Rico Renzi. Let me double check that there. Be absolutely sure. Yep.
Doesn't it doesn't say the
With
covers on the
letters
front?
by letters by Clayton Cowles, and I will have to double check the information for the graphic novel. Um, but as I'm doing that, let me get into some of the context stuff. We do like context here. Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. The character of Squirrel Girl was made a while ago as a joke character, but in the year 2015, a small team of cool creatives at Marvel put together a book called The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, which was, if I'm being real honest here, rock solid and some of the best superhero comics I've ever read. Uh, it ran for, I think, a total of 58 issues. It got renumbered somewhere very early in the beginning because of continuity nonsense. Rock solid series
Oh no!
centers on Doreen Green, aka the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, her best friend and college roommate Nancy Whitehead, as well as her ever-expanding cast of friends, including Tomas Lara Perez, also known as Chipmunk Hunk, and Ken Shiga, aka Koi Boy. Whomst we stand? Whomst we stand? Whomst we stand? Uh, they go on a multitude of adventures in today's selection, since I couldn't naturally ask Taylor to read 58 comics or approximately 1,500 pages. We're going through the first 8 issues, as well as the original graphic novel that came out in 2016. Uh, Over the course of these, just to give you a quick summary, so you have a general plot line to grasp onto as we go into a free-form discussion led by Taylor later on in the show. Uh, the first 8 issues cover a brief establishing arc in the first issue where Doreen tells us, okay, I've done the whole wander around kind of free sort of living hero thing, but I need to get my life in order. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a degree in computer science. I'm going to stop living in the Avengers attic, which I'm feeling
Which,
kind of guilty about. So we need to stop talking about that forever.
which apparently Iron Man told her to do. Because
Is that really?
that's in
Oh,
these
man.
comics too. Iron Man told her.
Oh, ah, man, you did get to like the backup stuff.
I
Additionally,
did.
besides the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl issues, and the volumes that I handed off to Taylor are some of the earlier appearances of Squirrel Girl, including her first one, which I'm sure we'll get into, and I'm sure I will regret not refreshing my memory with all of those.
Oh, I have a lot to say. So
Oh
basic.
heavens! And
So basically, how
I,
this
I am.
podcast
I've got context.
you have
Oh, sorry.
context.
Carry on.
I was just gonna explain basically how this podcast is going to work is that every Tuesday, at 9 p.m. because Thursdays are supernatural days now. Shit. For the next week alone. Um, this will start with the one of us who is introducing the other person to whatever we're reviewing and discussing for the night as the introduction of the podcast and with some context summary and a basic explanation of what it was, and then the other person's going to give their initial thoughts on it, and then we'll go into like free form discussion. Which, if you haven't been watching me for long, you should know I go off on tangents. It's hard to keep me on point. So that's going to be a lot of Noah's job. But I have a lot to say about this comic. And when he first told me about it, it was the first time I had ever met him. The only other thing he had ever ranted about to me and before Squirrel Girl was Junji Ito, and I'm probably not saying the name right, and I'm sorry if I'm not. So I was not really holding this to high standards because when he fanboys over comics and mangas and artists specifically, it's never what I expect. But this was actually really entertaining. And like just right off the bat, I was reading it, and my first expression was, "Man, when you're reading a Squirrel Girl comic, everybody else's language is brought down to her level. They all start talking like her. The person who talks the most differently from her is Nancy. Everyone else just talks like Squirrel Girl. And it's weird reading a Squirrel Girl comic, seeing Hawk get ready to smash, and then him saying this eloquent sentence about how Nick Fury stole his line, and that makes him even angrier. It's really weird when Hawk is the most formal speaking one of them.
That is very true. I love that's a part of Ryan North's writing that I like a lot. His voice infects everything. No character evades the voice of Mr. North. And everyone else on the creative team just kind of rolls with that level of heightened stylism that he brings to the party.
I love it because I'm like, oh shit, it's Tony Stark. And the first time Tony appears is in the Squirrel Power one in the extra comic at the back. And even in that one, he talks like her, despite the fact that it's an older comic, so I'm pretty sure it was before North's time writing. But even in that, he's brought down to her language. And, excuse me, just first tangent right off the bat, about Squirrel Girl, Squirrel Power, the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Squirrel Power series. In this collection he gave me, the very back of it is the first comic you see her meeting Iron Man, which I think is her first comic appearance ever. If I did my research right, which I might not have because I was just trying to like find quick answers for context. Because he didn't give me any context. That spiel you got right at the beginning, I didn't get. I got a Squirrel Girl keychain. Oh, that's not the keychain. He gave me a Squirrel Girl keychain, said she was awesome and one of the best Marvel heroes ever, and that I would really enjoy her, and that's all I've had. Plus, she's beaten Thanos.
For posterity's sake, the giving of the keychain and the recommending Squirrel Girl were not directly connected entities. There was a practical reason I was handing over a keychain on top of recommending Squirrel Girl.
Yes.
And hey, if I could get back to my contextualizing spiel, I do have a little bit more to get through.
Oh, I thought you were done. That was already so much. This is the keychain.
I just also wanted the good people at home to know a bit about the plot of what we're going over. So then we can jump into things and go back and forth all over, and they'll have a backbone to work off of.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there plot?
There was some plot. There was a lot of plot, I'll have you know. I'm going to give it in some quick, fast bullet points. Bullet point 1. She moves into her new computer science college studying role. Moves in with Nancy, fends off Kraven by convincing him to pursue new life goals. Fends off Galactus by redirecting his energies and also finding him a better planet.
We're gonna get all to that in the discussion.
I just want you know what? Fair enough. I just figured people might want to know some of the
here's a
weird
quick summary.
Whatever.
Here's
You're
a quick
right.
summary of the plot. Squirrel Girl is now in college, and at the end of these collection of comics, which skip around in her college career, you not only get to know her roommate, her best friend, and another hero who is the friend of another hero she met on the first day, who all have the power to speak to animals, except for her roommate, aka her best friend, Nancy Whitehead, who is just fantastic. Best character already. My favorite. And then sometimes she drags other heroes in, or they end up crossing her path and she has to save them. Okay? Like, Spidey gets dragged through this. Not in, like, a mean-spirited way, but, like, I'm sorry I was, brainwashed again. He literally left that as a note on her desk. It was adorable. But yeah, that's basically the plot. It's different scenarios she ends up in with some background of a college life because they don't focus on the classes or the college life much.
That's fair. So, I take it you have some bullet points you want to dive into.
Yes!
Where do we want to go first?
what was I saying at the beginning of this? Because that was one of... Yeah, okay, Iron Man. So, I'm not even going to focus right off the bat on, like, Squirrel Girl, the Unbeatable series comic introduction. I'm going to go back to the Iron Man part that's included in the back of this, where Iron Man asks her how old she is. She says she's 14. Well, she turned 14 last month, so she's barely a teenager, really. And he's like, well, I don't work with kids, but I could call Captain America for you. Are you telling me that no, Tony Stark has a level of like okay, so I'm gonna quote it because it's fucking he's like, I don't do partners, but I can call okay, hang on. What makes you think I need a partner? Every hero should have a partner, don't you know? And besides, I like you, you're my favorite Avenger. He finds out how old she is. Oh man, I had this. I had this. He basically goes for her, tests all her powers, isn't impressed, and then tries to, like, pawn her off on Captain America. And then after she says no, he's like, well, I can't work with kids because I can't be responsible for your safety. And that's his excuse. And then tells her, I'll hire you, or you can try out for the Avengers once you finish college. How's that for a deal? But, like, I don't know if she has a home, or if she goes to high school, because she keeps saying how she can't go back home and how she can't go back to high school. So you get this little thing at the end of the book after you know she gets to college somehow. I don't know if Tony's paying for that or what is going on. And then it's just like her 14 and she basically admits to living on the streets. I would have loved some context for this, Noah.
I don't know what to tell you.
Right,
she was a joke character. It was like a Christmas special from 1991, written by a guy who had no intention of ever bringing her back.
And the fact that Iron Man's like, no, I can't be responsible for a child's safety. Let me call Captain America for you. What? I feel like that's some shade. I don't know enough about to say because it's not like Captain America is Batman and collecting all those little teenage boys to be part of his army. Was there something I missed in the Marvel comics?
Man.
I mean, I'm waiting for an answer.
I mean, what? I'm not sure. What is it that's so confusing? He's like, I don't think a child should be wandering around out here. I'm going to call another authority figure, maybe. What confounds you here? Is it just that Tony in comics is marginally more responsible than Tony in movies? Is that what you want me to say?
No.
Tony in movies is operating on like.
I'm rich. I'll pay
Tony
for
in movies is operating on like exponentially smaller brains, you know, as the movies go on, and he didn't start with many to begin with.
Tony in the movies is literally just Batman with a funny personality. Because Batman just finds a kid and picks him up. That's what Batman does.
That's what we're working with here.
But, no, I just found it hilarious because, like, from what I remember of Captain America in the comics, I don't think he was running an orphanage. And it's the fact that Tony's like, yeah, no, I don't do partners, kid. Plus, you're too young to work with me. How about I call Cap? He's still part of the Avengers. What's the difference of her working with Captain America and Tony Stark? I don't get it. Otherwise, that's just something that, like, I've read, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is gonna bug me all day. But maybe he has an answer for it. Maybe. I'll be lucky enough for that. Otherwise, so, can we talk about Chipmunk Hunk? Oh my god.
Oh, yes, you have thoughts on Tomas.
Yes.
Thomas. I don't think I'm pronouncing it right.
I do have
You have thoughts on
him.
everyone's favorite. All the powers of a chipmunk and all the powers of a hunk.
Okay, but
what are your thoughts on this man?
I saw his name and immediately I'm like, why do all, like, the male superheroes who start off as teenagers always end up with, like, grown terms, and Squirrel Girl is still going by Squirrel Girl. That's the first thing I thought of. But then I'm like, oh, it's comics, sexism. They're always referred to as girl, even when they're women. Invisible Girl, prime example. Was a woman when she got her powers. Yeah. But, I'm sorry, but the fact that they have one person who can talk to chipmunks, Chipmunk Hunk, koi boy who can talk to fish, although he only ever explicitly mentions koi, so I think it's only koi he can talk to. He's basically like a watered down version of it's all fish. Okay, because he only mentions koi in the comics, so I was confused. And then you have Squirrel Girl. And Koi Boy and Chipmunk Hunk were created for Squirrel Girl, weren't they?
Abso-fraggin-lutely.
They were not already existing. Okay, I can tell. I love it, though. They don't know what to call their fucking group. They're just like, oh yeah, we have animal-based powers too. Oh, and then there's Nancy. What are we gonna do for Nancy? I fucking love her, and she's so precious. She's honestly the most competent of them all. If you were to grade this group on, like, who has the most, like, brain cells at any given moment, it's Nancy. Nancy has all of them. Sometimes she lends one or two to Squirrel Girl for when she goes off on her fights.
I mean, that's absolutely true, and I know how much you love competency in your characters.
I do! I really do! I hate incompetent characters. They're just not fun. Nancy's fun. Nancy is like, wait, you guys have never heard of Squirrel Girl? Let me tell you. Then gets interrupted 5 times with different stories that are one of them was definitely Spider-Man's story, because that gets debunked right away. Was another one the Punisher's story? Mixed with, like, some other elements? Because
Taylor's referring to an issue...
I am.
To an issue where, to bide time, and just to hang out while being held hostage, Nancy introduces a bunch of passing fellow hostages to Squirrel Girl, all of whom assume that she's this made-up person that doesn't exist, and pass the time making up fictitious stories about her. And yes, one is definitely a big old pastiche of Spider-Man, which is funny given what we get into in the graphic novel, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Don't worry, we'll get to that.
What? What are you talking about?
Oh, the graphic novel, the original graphic novel. Squirrel Girl beats up the Marvel Universe.
So, okay. I didn't really see Spider-Man having a big part in that.
No, he doesn't. But in the same way that the pastiche of Squirrel Girl is sort of happening in that, of Spider-Man is happening in that issue where everybody's telling these weird random stories, there's also a quiet underlying bit of joking going along with all the clone nonsense that fans of Spider-Man comics can pick up on.
I did love that clone conversation, because Squirrel Girl gets cloned by this device that Tony wants to use squirrels to test on, which is why he invites her and her friends to his tower. And, which, you know, makes a lot more sense if he's paying for her college, because she only mentions her mother once. It was in her first comic, and she's never been brought up again. And apparently she's lived in several different places without the other heroes knowing. That's kind of hinted out throughout these comics. So, like, I don't know what has been going on with this girl. I don't know where she's been living, or, like, what's her relationship is with the different heroes. So I'm kind of concerned, but if, like, I'm just assuming, I'm operating under the assumption that Tony's paying for her college, and sometimes she, like, updates him on shit. And that's why it's perfectly normal for her to go to the tower, but when she needs help and he owes her one, she's just gonna blow up his machines and steal what she wants. Because that's what she does right before going to the tower. In the first issue, in Squirrel Power, She breaks into Tony's place, blows up two of his robots, fight the other 8 while her squirrels steal some of his armor, and then in Squirrel You Know It's True, she gets invited to his tower, walks in, and no one brings it up. No one brings up the fact that she blew up his shit and stole things, and then just returned them without having to blow anything up.
It's like a running gag that she and Tony are Twitter friends, because that's how this comic. That's another fun thing that I love about this is that this comic, instead of doing the boring paragraph recaps that most other superhero comics do, which are mind-numbing and my eyes glaze over, this one has it just be a long set of tweets and threads from different characters in universe fake Twitter accounts. And actually, also fun fact, these were also all real Twitter accounts. You could follow these Twitter accounts that Ryan North presumably managed that would just tweet out both the recaps and also just other random stuff whenever he felt like it.
So that's something Tony brings up, because when Tony wants her to summon some squirrels that he could test a new alien device on, she's like, no, that's horrible. What would they get for it? And he's like, well, I thought the girl who always tweets at me would just want to help. And she's like, what? No, you're testing on live subjects. How do you know it's not going to hurt them? And Tony's like, so you're not down to do this? And she's like, no. And he just ignores her and turns to her 2 other friends, like the 2 guys she's been hanging out with Nancy, and says, well, what about chipmunks? And he's just like, what? No, Squirrel Girl just told you no. And then he turns and looks at Koi Boy, and Koi Boy's just shaking his head like, no. And he's just like, well, damn, why aren't kids down with animal testing nowadays? And to answer a real quick question in my chat, Squirrel Girl is a mutant like the X-Men characters, so she has a squirrel tail that she hides in her pants somehow, though that's only brought up once and never mentioned again. And she basically she's half squirrel, basically, so she can jump like a squirrel and fight like a squirrel and talk to squirrels. And her real best friend that isn't human is Tippy Toe, which is a squirrel with a pink bow, which is how Nancy figures out, oh, so my roommate is Squirrel Girl because she already introduced me, her squirrel pet with a pink bow. Cool. And Doreen is a Squirrel Girl's real name, and she's just like, what? No, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that. That wasn't me. And Nancy's like, don't lie to me. And Squirrel Girl's like, fine, I won't lie. That's basically what happened.
It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. I'm not saying it's not a lot of fun. I'm just like, this comic gets actually really political. Because they make fun of capitalism and how awful it is. And then they get mad at Tony for, like, suggesting animal testing because he's this big, bad corporation dude. Which, you know, fair! About time someone, like, calls him out for shit in the comics. So it's in this, like, funny, passive-aggressive way. There's actually... Oh, damn. I wrote notes, and then I lost them in my notebook. They're written all over the page. The rhino! Okay, so there's this rhino who apparently gets mutated by someone else and turned into a bipedal, half-human rhino. You got context for that while I look up these pages?
Hippo.
It's a hippo. Okay.
It's a hippo.
It's Hippo the Hippo. That's his name. And the way she beats him... I'm looking at the wrong comic. The way she beats him is listening
Volume
to him.
2.
Yeah, no, it's Volume 2. It's the first bad guy she fights at the bank after all the stories about her. Oh, man, I sent you pictures of this, too. So, it's this hippo. This giant hippo. Hippo the Hippo. And, oh, yeah, her cards are fantastic. So the way she learns about people is that she has a deck of cards, which are collectibles in the comics, apparently. And all the characters' informations are on those cards, and that's how she figures shit out. And honestly, I'm down for it. It's quick and easy. All the cards have a little note from Deadpool at the bottom of them. They're adorable, and I love them. I'm pretty sure Deadpool's making them for her. Even though she says it's like part of the Iron Man series. Part of the Iron Man Versus series at one point. No, I'm positive Deadpool's making that shit for her.
That,
So she
for the
listens.
record,
Continue. Go
that
ahead.
bit about the Iron Man versus is very much like the older days Squirrel Girl, pre Ryan North, still when she's a joke character, hanging out with the Great Lakes Avengers slash Great Lakes X-Men slash Great Lakes whatever, another of Marvel's Z-list joke teams. And I think Iron Man versus was actually a card series at the time. It looked like those were actual cards as opposed to these fake Deadpool trading cards here. But I
Yeah,
think that's where they got the inspiration for the bit.
that's cool to know. Now this hippo is like, do you have any idea how much money it takes to feed me? I eat 90 pounds of food a day, and no one feeds me for free anymore because I have intelligence and I walk like a human. But I can't get a job because I'm really a hippo, not a human. And how he doesn't have, like, human rights because he's not a human. And Squirrel Girl's like, you know what? That's a good point. And they stop fighting. It's like I'm watching the Flash cartoon. Okay, so we're like Flash just listens to his bad guy's issues, and he's like, you know what? You got a point. Let me help you out, dude. That's what Squirrel Girl does, and I love it. I love a hero that's out here looking for like reasonable ways and fixes to people's issues instead of just saying, nah, you're a bad guy. Let me punch you. Okay, so
So
she's listening to him, and she's just like, oh, listen, I could probably get you a job as a demolition dude. And he's like, what's demolition? And she explains it. And he's like, well, that sounds like it could be fun, and I need the money to eat. And she's like, okay, well, here you go. I'll give you contact with my mom. I'm not going to give you contact with my mom because then I realize you'll know who my mother is and who my identity is, and you currently have intelligence. We don't know if it's going to wear off of him or not. And so he's like, y'all are guarding the bank anyway, so I guess it's too much trouble to try and rob it. But if this job doesn't work out, if capitalism doesn't help me, I'm just going to come back and steal the whole building. I'm not going to rob it. I'm going to steal the whole building and walk off with my shit. And Squirrel Girl's like, you know what? That's fair. That's fair. Rob the bank. Steal the whole bank. Good luck with your life. And I love
it's a
it.
great time.
I love it. That was my favorite fight of the whole thing. She does the same thing with Thanos. That's how she beats Thanos. It's fucking therapy. Her superpower is therapy. And just listening.
Oh my goodness. It is so great. I love how much it does play with like the idea of what a good superhero is. Like it's not just like, oh yeah, you're gonna solve your problems with dialogue and compromise and empathy, but it goes down to like even more like of her choices beyond that, which are great. I love that. I love the dialogue. I love that we're all talking out and like getting to know each other's feelings. It's great. That never happens.
It
Like it's
never
even
happens.
like but like it even goes down into her other choices. Like the first time that she meets Thomas, do you remember? Like she's coming on to Empire State University campus for the first time.
Yeah.
This is her, she's just moving on. She's carrying all of the boxes of everything that she owns, and it's a big old stack of boxes, but she's got the proportional strength of a squirrel, so it's no big deal. Except normal humans don't carry that many boxes, and she's just decided to have a secret identity. Uh-oh. So when a passing man, a hunk, perhaps, says to her, hey, do you need help with those boxes? She's like, oh, shoot! Drops them all. Yes, probably. Normal people don't hold up all those boxes all the time. And then she goes on and is about to do the whole superhero thing of like trying to lie to cover herself when Tippy Toe is like, hey, you gonna lie? And then Doreen's like, oh yeah,
I
shoot.
probably shouldn't.
Maybe I shouldn't do probably shouldn't do the bad thing, even if it is the superhero thing.
Despite the
I'm
fact
gonna
that
do
she
the right
lies
thing because I'm
later.
Squirrel Girl.
She lies to Thor and Thor. There's apparently a woman Thor. I don't know who she is or why she's in the comic. I am behind on current modern like Thor comics. I don't really read him much. So there's a female Thor, and she straight up just lies about what she did to Captain America. She's like, oh yeah, he let me borrow his phone. Yeah, that's totally reasonable. He definitely let me borrow his phone.
I mean, do you want to say Captain America, much like all the mobs that you and I have been fighting throughout the day, was brainwashed, and I had to take him and also several other very famous Avengers down in a matter of seconds between panels. And I grabbed his phone and I called you because I just had a brilliant revelation brought to me by best character of the series, Nancy Whitehead, who looked up on
Nancy.
Wikipedia who the potential villain could be.
Yes.
That's a
Okay.
lot to elaborate upon. And Thor and Odinson were in the middle of a fight. She doesn't have time to explain all of that
So
in the middle of a fight.
Odin's son is the name Thor is going by now because he no longer wields his hammer. The new female Thor wields his hammer. And Captain America is also Falcon instead of Steve Rogers in this because he got replaced, and I love it. And like Steve Rogers is there complaining about how like they aren't fixing the problem, and Falcon's just happy to be here. Everyone else is fighting, and he's just happy to be Captain America and to show up in a comic as Captain America. Yes, they did. They did look up a villain's facts on Wikipedia because the villain was an ancient god from Asgardian legend who is a mischievous character, a lot like Loki, but more evil. And it's a giant squirrel pretending to be her. Which, just, I fucking love it. And, like, they're talking about how, oh, this is an ancient villain all the way from Asgard. How are we supposed to find out information on the villain? And Nancy's just like, don't worry, I got you. Wikipedia, have you heard of it? And she's like, yeah, like her entire history's right here. You can just look it all up right here. They're like, why don't we think of this more often? Yes, Ratatasker. I can't say the name, but that is who it is. Also, Nancy writes cat fanfiction of Thor. I'm not much in the cat fanfiction, but I just have so many reasons to love Nancy. She has no powers, but she does the most, and I love her.
Would it entice you if I told you that in later issues that we didn't get a chance to get into here, in part because I didn't have the time to just send you like my login info onto the comics website, which will not be named, so you could just read my complete digital collection of Squirrel Girl and see for your own very eyes Nancy's original Cat Thor comics, which were
We did
several
get no,
pages of which were made.
we did get we did get a little bit of that in here right before we get Loki transforming his head into Cat Thor's head and just using that for the rest of the comic. Ah, there it
Pages
is.
that out.
It's right here. It's so adorable.
Ah, yes.
I love it. So,
It's excellent.
cat fan fiction, real quick, because I gotta ask for an explanation in the chat. Cat fan fiction is when you take a character and you turn them into a cat. It's like if you were rewriting the Warrior series, but with other characters from different fandoms. And if you don't know the Warrior series, it's written by a group of women who write under the pseudonym of Aaron Hunter together. Lots to say about it. That's not what we're talking about today. Good things, bad things. Genocide's wrong when it's happening to our main group of heroes, but the main group of heroes commit religious genocide later on. That's not colonialism.
Maybe it's time to plan that as another episode in the future.
Oh, hell no. Not anytime soon. I need some time. That happens in the like third or fourth arc. You have 20 books you got to get to before you get to that.
Okay.
It's a lot. But yeah, so Loki turns himself into cat head Thor to entertain Nancy because she's the best and he knows she's the best and they're getting along great and it annoys Thor, Odin's son, and it's just the best. It's just the best. Also, I love it. Everyone's like, but wait, we can't go to Asgard because we have to keep these people from hurting themselves. And Nancy's like, I don't have superpowers. I can go to Asgard. I can go. Nancy's the best. Nancy's the best. I haven't shown a picture of Nancy. This is Nancy. This is Nancy
We really
Whitehead.
need to
She is the best.
get like a a way to slide through. Nancy's solid. Big fan of her. Big fan of her knitting. Big fan of her cat Mew. Big fan of her fan fiction.
But okay, so I think my favorite part of the Radiskir act were everybody. So Radiskir is a god of chaos who likes to brainwash people into fighting each other. And this is my favorite comic of all the ones you gave me about Squirrel Girl for two reasons. One, when Radiskir is teleported back to their prison after Loki had so many schemes and evil plans going on that he forgot releasing her was one of them. She just gets teleported away by by Heimdall in just a bright flash of rainbow smoke. So it looks like the gays literally defeated Radiskir, the god of chaos, and I love it. Especially when it's like led by Loki. And then there's a consent. There's a consent joke in here. That isn't a joke. There's a consent metaphor in this arc. That's just awesome. Because it plays on the trope, and every semi-serious, like, media does this at some point. Where, like, someone is brainwashed and they hurt another person, and then they feel guilty for hurting that person for, like, the rest of the season or episode or series, whatever. Farscape does that with Dargo and John a couple times. Supernatural does that with Dean and Sam a lot. Basically, most series, if they have an episode where someone's being controlled by another person or influenced, that person always feels guilty for hurting somebody. I think TMNT did it too. TMNT, the 2003 series, definitely did it. I don't know about the 2018 series, but I think they did too. But Squirrel Girl is fighting Radiskir. Damn, I was looking at Loki Cat, and I was thinking cats are cute. I was completely distracted by that. And Radiskir says, "How do you know? How can you trust your friends? Hang on. How do you know? How can you know? How can you trust any one of your friends don't secretly want you to fail? Because they're not jerks." And she says, "Your friends here, they're loving this." As, like, she's getting held against a tree so she can't fight because she's the only person Radiskir's, like, taunts haven't worked on. So Radiskir's trying to pull all the stops to get her to give into the chaos. Which, Squirrel Girl's just invincible from everything, right? Like, she's the unbeatable, but she's also, like, invincible, huh?
It's like quietly, just a little bit. Like, just a little bit. I mean, it's not like she's taking massive, super big old punches. It's just normal, super strong punches.
She's a fun Mary Sue that doesn't tote around her power in an arrogant fashion.
I feel like Mary Sue is an inherently, like, it's got too much negative connotation. I've heard too many feminists scream about, I'm sorry, anti-feminists scream about certain characters being Mary Sue's to really ever be able to take the term seriously as, like, an analytical one. But I suppose you could call her that.
Well, if you look at it simply from a literary perspective, that is what she is. She is she is a Mary Sue. She has a way of getting out of every situation. She's always able to find a way to fix things. Even if she's not the one to fix it, she already told one of her friends how they could fix it. She's always got.
But doesn't that describe most superheroes, especially like the higher stylism ones?
Well, most of them are Gary Sues, which is why you have to create ridiculous bad guys to meet their power structure, and so that they're actually an issue. You could say, like, Spider-Man's not a Gary Sue simply because of the fact he does lose. But Squirrel Girl, when she loses, she still wins and it's always because she already told someone else the answer. Like, Spider-Man sometimes gets lucky and someone else helps him, but not because he told them the answer, which is, like, the biggest difference I'm, like, picking at right here. When you're discussing superheroes, it's a thin fucking line that you're toting. From the get-go.
I mean, I feel like that implies that she is sort of like the constant like one with all the answers at all the times, and that's just not true. Like we've discussed, Nancy is the competent one in the group. She's got
Competence does not
solid
mean...
information.
I love Nancy. This is not a drag on my favorite character. Not at all. I'm super biased. But Nancy, while she is the competent one, she's not always the one who has a solution. She comes up with one solution on her own in the entirety of the comics that you gave me, and it was when Squirrel Girl was dealing with the issue of who should go to Asgard. And Nancy's like, well, you all have superpowers. I'm going to go to Asgard. It's dangerous, but I'm with God, so I'm going to go. And that is her answer. And Squirrel Girl's like, oh yeah, I can trust you not to die. And that's the end of the discussion.
I mean, she was also the one that was like, "Oh, maybe the bad guy's Ratatoskr. Maybe we should ask about that sort of thing."
That's fair. I'll give you that. That's fair. I'm just
and
saying,
at the end,
competence and Mary Sue-ness sometimes go hand in hand, but oftentimes Mary Sues do not come off as competent, but still always have the answers.
okay, so she's a Mary Sue or some shade thereof. I can concede that. So long as we agree that that's not a term with like inherent negative connotations, just a state of being a character can be in.
Yes, it is a state a character can be in. I'm not using a negative way, just in the way that the literary definition of it works. But yeah, so basically Ratatoskr is going after her with all of her powers, trying to give Squirrel Girl to give in and like break her mind and make her part of the mob mentality that she already has going throughout the rest of the city. She's already got all the Avengers under her power, including Spider-Man, who apologizes for getting mind controlled again, and a bunch of others. And so she's taunting her, saying, "How your friends here? They're loving this. How do you not know they aren't enjoying seeing you fail?" And Squirrel Girl's just like, "What? No, they're not. You can't mind control someone to be a jerk and then axe the jerk you've created if they're into it. Like, that doesn't count. The real chipmunk hunk and coy boy would never do this." And I love it. I love it. Because, yes, that's it exactly. That is it exactly. Villains, stop trying to make the heroes feel shitty for the things you're making them do. Just stop it. Because, like, it's not them. And then, like, other characters usually react with, like, "Oh, man, I can't believe you did that. I'll never be able to trust you again." When they know it wasn't them. It's a trope I do not like. Like, don't get me wrong. I love the angst of a mind control trope. I love the person who's being mind controlled having trouble, like, coming to terms with their action. What I don't like is when, like, the outsider who isn't mind controlled blames the person who was for those said actions. And Squirrel Girl's just like, nah, fuck that shit. Fuck you. No. And I love it. I love it.
We're here to be competent in the face of, like, dumb tropes. So they don't have to be that complicated. For example, the clone problem. Easy answer.
Easy answer.
Immediately after, okay, at the start of the graphic novel, as we've discussed, the graphic novel, of course, being called Squirrel Girl Beats Up the Marvel Universe, Squirrel Girl gets cloned. And obviously, later on, you know, as a reader, that's going to be the one that beats up the Marvel Universe. But you don't. But we're not there yet. We're not there at that point yet. This is still the early point. We're still in, like, you know, this is fun and games. We're in Act 2.
So actually, what I expected to happen while I was reading is I expected a Civil War situation. I thought Squirrel Girl comics were going to make fun of the Civil War between Iron Man and Tony, and how there was a second Civil War with Tony, and I think it was Captain Marvel later. I don't remember who was part of the second Civil War. I thought it was
Let's not bring continuity into this.
I thought it was gonna be making fun of that. Like, guys, this already happened once. How did this happen twice? And show how stupid it is to try and figure out who's the real Squirrel Girl over the other one, and like who's the real evil one. And like,
They,
no, that didn't happen. They established right
they
away
don't.
how you tell the two apart. The bad Squirrel Girl becomes Tony Stark, like a Tony Stark mentality where like, well, we can protect the world for squirrels and make it a utopia. We just have to get rid of all the humans. Where Tony's like, well, we can protect the world for humans. We just have to get rid of all the aliens. Like,
Why is it always fascism? Why is it always fascism?
they like this issue got started with Tony Stark messing with alien tech. It gets solved by a squirrel, as all Squirrel Girl things do. And it's perfect. It's perfect.
Tippy Toe almost sacrifices her life. We will not be making light of that. Tippy Toe crashed into a wall trying to teleport Thor's hammer to the moon to save Squirrel Girl. I won't get into the context for that one. It was beautiful and sweet.
I will not lie. I cared more about what happened to Tippy Toe than I would have if it was like Koi Boy or Chipmunk Hunk who did it.
Real honesty, I probably did too. I'm gonna be honest, but that's because we connect more with Tippy Toe than we have with the others.
Because
Not to
like,
diss Ken or Thomas.
listen, it's not a diss on them. It's just this comic establishes earlier on, hey, yeah, she's got a crush on Chipmunk Hunk, but guess what? She's got other shit to do with her life, and I love it. The crush is at the back of her mind. They're all superhero pals. Here's her best friends, Nancy and Tippy Toe, and they're the important ones, and I love it.
It's a lot of fun. If I ever get my hands on the rest of my like hard copy collection, I'll share them with you just for funsies, because you like to see how things progress. Like she does genuinely seem to forget her crush on Thomas until somebody else is interested in him, and then it's a disaster, and there's a whole issue about her going on like app dates with a bunch of different people, like a random superhero, false flag Alex Jones type that thinks superheroes are all like part of a CIA conspiracy. She goes out with Johnny Storm. That goes as well as you'd expect. With
She calls out
a
Kitty
Sentinel.
Pride. Like, she says Kitty Pride is so stuck up. And I'm like, what? I thought you two would be friends. My dreams are crushed. You already get along with Tony. Why can't you get along with Kitty? Fuck. I don't know where.
When did she mention Kitty?
She mentions Kitty in that short comic where Iron Man's trying to pawn her off
In
on
91?
somebody else. Yeah, in 91, she calls Kitty
Okay, that was
up. And
It's 91. She was a joke character. We can't hold her accountable for that.
It's like my heart was crushed because I wanted them to get along. I wanted to
What was
see
Kitty like in 91?
I don't know. Because in 91, that was when, I think that was around the time her and Colossus had like their first big breakup in the comics, because she was flipping back and forth between Colossus and Bobby. And hey, okay, shut up on the ship. Alright, we're not here to discuss the ship. There's issues with it. There's some cute things about it. Moving on with our lives. She kept flipping back and forth between, like, romance with Bobby, romance with Colossus, and I think there was another X-Men character who I do not remember was her romance. And, like, that was Kitty's, like, arc in the 90s. I don't remember if Jubilee got introduced in the 90s, right?
Yeah, I think she debuted in the cartoon and then she transferred over. Like she did a Harley Quinn, I think.
Yeah, Jubilee, she kind of took on Kitty Pryde's role as like the youngest member of the X-Men and became the one that had to learn after that. So a lot of Kitty's stuff in the 90s, from what I remember reading, is just like the romance arcs and her having issues with the other girls who like the same guys as her. It's been a bit, so don't like quote me on that shit, but that's what I remember of Kitty's arcs in the 90s. So I don't know why she would be considered stuck up.
I guess like the writer thought she was enough of a stereotype that she could call her stuck up, or just like that we're doing one of these jokes with like an outsider entering superhero community, and it would make sense maybe that there'd be some standoffishness or something.
Like
I don't know.
she has a complaint on about Xavier Academy because she doesn't want to be part of the Xavier Academy. She doesn't think she'll fit in with that school. But I think that's mostly because like she just came from a school where she constantly got bullied, and like those are the gifted kids who get sent on like life or death missions. If she joined the
Could be.
X-Men, she would not be as well known as she is right now.
That's very true. I
She'd be
mean,
in the backwash.
the pile of Z tier X-Men characters is endlessly high. Maybe we should invite over an X-Men fan to talk about all of them. Maybe we shouldn't.
So,
We don't have 8 hours to kill.
I don't care about all of them. I just care about a few. Because there's too many. There's too many to care about all of them.
Leaping back to the start of this tangent, I think I was talking about
I don't
how
even remember.
how this. I think I was talking about like the fun, like we were talking about the ongoing tendency to take like a common trope in like sci-fi superhero type storytelling and just to approach it
Oh.
smartly. And I was going to use as an object lesson what I'm sure several members of our viewership have been patiently waiting to find out. How do you tell which of you is a clone and which of you is not a clone? And the answer is actually pretty simple. As the two Squirrel Girls at the start of the graphic novel explained to Spider-Man while they're mutually fighting crime together before the clone has gone off and done a fascism. They say, well,
Did a
we have
big
identical memories.
fascism. Did a big genocide.
Did a bit of a
too.
fascism.
Tried to do a genocide.
Did a
it
bit of
didn't
a
work.
bit of a fascism.
Yeah, didn't work.
Anyway, pre-genocide, pre-fascism. They're like, hey, we both got shoved into this cloning pod, and both of us have identical memories, right? So we both remember ending up on the left side of the pod. Well, I woke up on the right side, and I was like, oh, I must be the clone. That's it.
That's
Which,
all
you
you
know,
gotta do.
poor. That's all you gotta do. And poor Spider-Man's like, oh yeah, obviously, of course,
He can't even remember
obviously.
what side he ended up on. He cannot recall
Poor
at
man. I don't
all.
think. What a buffoon, Peter.
He's been cloned so many times in like the one-off series and just like casual character arcs that might not be the real Peter in the comics right now. Like it may just not have ever been the real Peter.
Knows at this point, who even knows? Like,
One
poor
of them
Peter's
went
body has been
evil.
through so much.
One of them went evil. We assume the evil one's not our Peter, but even Squirrel Girl admits, yeah, you got a point, but we can't kill all the humans. They're our friends too. That's the only thing that keeps her from a fascism. Basic
Like,
sympathy.
maybe we have to care about everyone.
How is his
Maybe
DNA still stable? That is a great question. How is Peter Parker's DNA still stable?
I mean, it's so hard to know. I think the bigger question is how is his mind still stable? Back and forth identity crisis.
It's
Not to
not.
mention he spent
I'm
like
sorry.
several years.
It's just not. It's not.
It's not.
It's just not.
Okay, it's stable enough for him to still kind of sort of maintain a secret identity
That's
most of the time,
That's like
and
saying,
also have a single identity. The man is not a system yet. How is that possible? He had Dr. Octopus running the wheel for like 5 years there.
listen,
And
okay.
we step past that and we're all going to pretend that like I know you
How
can just
is
hit the reset
Tony-
button. That's how comics work.
How
But
is-
it's still like, holy cow.
Okay, how does Tony not have so much muscle atrophy that he can't walk anymore outside of the suit? Because he got so traumatized by everything that happened, by several things this has happened several times. Tony, when he gets traumatized, he has this thing he does where he just locks himself in a suit and he autopilots the suit with his fucking hands and mind and voice, and he doesn't move in it sometimes. He just has the suit move him. Because he refuses to leave it. Because he's scared if he's going to leave it, he's not going to be able to save someone, or he's going to die, or someone near him's going to die. So, like, You can ask the same question of Tony. The point of the matter is, Marvel, Marvel, Marvel restarts. That's why Tony doesn't have multiple personalities. That's why Peter hasn't like sectioned himself off away from certain parts of his head. It's because Marvel, they have their coping, and the way they write their coping mechanism is, one or two ways for a coping mechanism to manifest. One's a bad way, one's a good way. Here you go. And I'm being very broad and general in my statement right now. I'm sure huge Marvel fans can pull up several recent examples of where that's wrong, and I actually show characters getting complicated feelings and having more than just two coping mechanisms. But it happens a lot. It's happened a lot. Back when I was actively reading it.
Trope.
Is it though?
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a well. I mean, that's what you're saying, right? It's a trope that Marvel's using. They fall back on the like superheroing is something that tends to lead itself, tends to be a bad coping mechanism for some people, and you have to approach it healthily. That's like most of Marvel's point of like all their characters is that superheroing is not a healthy coping mechanism unless you have a balanced life.
You want to know?
And hey, bringing it back to the subject.
Sorry.
Squirrel Girl. Balanced life.
You want to know who has a healthy coping mechanism?
Yes.
Girl. Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl's just like, yeah, life be like that sometimes. And then she moves
That's
on
exactly
with her
where I
life.
was going.
She's just like, life
That's exactly
be like
where
that.
I was going.
Nancy's like,
Sometimes it do be like that.
Nancy's like, I'm not gonna be the person who gets kidnapped all the time and then you have to save them. And she's like, okay, let's fix it. You want an armor made of squirrels? And then Nancy has to point out to her, like, hey, you know the squirrels move away when you punch, right? So they don't get hurt. And she's like, what? You guys do that? And they're like, yeah, Doreen. Didn't you notice? Squirrel Girl's just like, nah, I thought y'all were super strong too.
Yeah, there's just like two issues where there's like squirrel body armor comes up, but I think in the second one Ryan had to be like, "Hey, wait a minute, that was a silly idea. We're trying to be a bit more grounded with our science sometimes. Sometimes when we want to be."
It's not just two issues. It's three, and it's the end of the first one, and then the first two of the second one. After Doreen
So that'd be like
after Doreen gets saved. Not Doreen. After Nancy gets saved by Doreen.
It's like issues 3 through 5 or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
It's a good time.
It's a good time. It's a fair. I would recommend the series. I'm enjoying it. I enjoy her character, Squirrel Girl. The way she defeats Galactus is smart. It's the same way she beat the hippo. She's like, hey, so here's the thing. Why would you keep coming to Earth if you know we're just gonna fight for our life? I think you're just doing it because this is a takeout way. Because we're always going to find a different planet that has no souls on it that you can eat so you can leave us alone. You just don't want to go through all the work of searching yourself, so you come to Earth hoping the humans already have a takeout order ready for you. And like, yeah, that makes sense. That's like how they used to say Thanos always creates a way for himself to be defeated because he knows he doesn't deserve to win. But actually in a way that makes sense. Like the Thanos thing, he's not all fucking powerful. He doesn't always create a way for himself to lose. It's just sometimes. And you could get into the argument of like what his mental attitude is, but Galactus makes sense. Like, oh, yeah, no, I can picture him just not wanting to go searching everywhere for food when he found a planet full of people who are like, oh yeah, we want to explore the galaxy. Here's some like dead planets you can eat, Galactus, so you can leave us alone. Here you go. I love it. I love how she talks. I love her tone. Even like Thor started talking like her. Like the moment he's like, oh fuck, Loki's around, he just starts talking like her and drops a lot of the like old
Asgardian accent.
Asgardian accent, yes. So
It's
great.
rock solid top to bottom, top to bottom. Oh, hey, I guess one other thing I'm curious to hear your thoughts about. Throughout the entire comic, and I don't think I've ever seen any other comic writer do this, except for one time when I guess they had a guest writer on this series. But throughout every issue, there are little notes at the bottom of just about every page from Ryan
Yeah.
North that are basically a commentary on the events of the comic itself. And I need to hear, Taylor, what are your thoughts on the ongoing commentary?
So, my favorite part is the very first time this happens, and it's pretty obvious, and they give you a cast at the beginning of the comic, and they only do this in 2 of the comics. You only get a cast in 2 of them. Well, no, you get a cast in 3 of them with the Thor thing going on, too. But the villain is shaded out because it's the first page, so you don't know who the villain is going to be. And so it's just like, AKA, we haven't met him yet. Like, we don't know. Just like, we're not sure. Fun fact, how are we supposed to tell you? And then at the bottom is like, wait, did I say Spider-Man theme song? Obviously, I meant the Squirrel Girl theme song. Who even is Spider-Man? And then they proceed to mention Spider-Man constantly in every issue of this comic. I don't know what their thing with Spider-Man is, but they constantly bring Peter Parker up in this. And I love it. It's just constantly comparing what Peter Parker does to what Squirrel Girl does. It's adorable. It's adorable. And like, usually I don't read those notes unless I'm confused about something. But if you're confused about something and reading those notes, you're not gonna have a good time. Those are just there to like fuck around. They're just there to mess with you and to make jokes that are easy to make. They're not there to like actually help you realize what is going on if you didn't read the previous issue.
Even while you're explaining that they are jokes, you have to trash them by calling them easy to make jokes.
Some of them are smart. Some of them are low-hanging fruit, and they use a lot of puns, and I'm not a big fan of puns.
You're not gonna have a good time with this series if you're not a fan of puns.
I mean, I'm fine with like Doreen does them. I'm not gonna keep reading the little bottom of the text just to get more. I wasn't trying to trash them. I'm just giving you my honest opinion. Can we talk more? Can we talk more about Iron Man and Doreen's relationship? Because
I
that's my biggest takeaway of the series.
I think you're looking too much into this. I think it really is they're just like Twitter friends that became kind of sort of superhero buddies.
Are
Like
they
it, they
though?
very much talk about it like that.
They do.
She has
They
like she
do.
has a healthy, happy relationship with her parents. We see them later on. They're well-to-do Canadians that have like a lovely
That's
house that are
great.
presumably helping her a little bit off with her superhero stuff and college.
That's great. That's not my point. My point is there are 2 characters that the comics constantly bring up and compare directly to Squirrel Girl. There's her idol and favorite Avenger, Iron Man, who they literally have her go on the same character arc as him and Captain America at the same time. That happened in the Civil War shit. Where she's like, well, yeah, I can agree with some of your points, but like, you're going a bit far, buddy. And Spider-Man, where she basically has the same flippant attitude Peter Parker first has when he starts superheroing before like he gets anxious about everything. Because he's a very anxious boy. Peter Parker has always been a very anxious boy. He becomes a very anxious man. But there's a point where he's just having fun being Spider-Man. And that is when he's the most like Squirrel Girl in these comics. And then the stuff that he would consider serious and made him more serious about his job and more scared about how being a superhero affects the people around him is stuff that Doreen's just like, yeah, that's part of the hero gig. I kind of knew that going in. And like, yeah, I'm still gonna have fun, and my friends understand what's going on, and I'll do everything I can to like protect them. But if they're gonna come out with me, they're risking their own lives. I'm not gonna take personal responsibility for them, but I'm also not gonna leave them hanging. And it's interesting. It's very interesting that it's those 2 characters that she draws the most parallels from. I really like it, and I really like the dynamic she has with both those characters. Because she steals Peter Parker's web slings after like beating the shit out of him because he made fun of her little group of friends. Which, you know, I can
Brainwashed at the time.
Brainwashed at the time, but like, come on, I'm not surprised. Peter would Peter would have thought that subconsciously, and it would have been for like two reasons. One, their names are actually kind of ridiculous, and he probably would have thought the joke was funny if it stayed in his head. Two, he's fucking jealous. He doesn't get any like real cool friends to like go on superhero adventures with. He gets the Avengers, and they're not friends really at first. They're co-workers that he has to be more professional around. Even like when they're off, he still has to be professional around them because he doesn't want people knowing his secret identity whenever there's a reset in his comics. But yeah, no, like, you can tell there was influence from both those characters in everything that happens with her. Even in the older comic, where she first meets Iron Man, and he tries to pawn a child off on Captain America like that's a Captain America thing to do.
It seems much more like a Captain America thing than an Iron Man thing, taking care of a child.
Who the fuck is the kid Captain America adopts? Because, like, I don't remember that happening in the comics.
I mean, Bucky, I guess.
Bucky's
He
not
did
a
Bucky for a while
child.
there.
Bucky's not a child.
Yeah. Yes, he was. He was a child. He was his Robin. You know, in the comics, that's how Bucky got his start.
Oh, shit. That is how he got his start.
You forgot about that?
I'm thinking, like, older Bucky when he's training
You're
him
thinking
to
like
replace
older
him.
Bucky.
I'm thinking like older Bucky when he's training him to replace him as Captain America. And like Falcon.
You're
and
thinking
how they were both
post.
adults.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thinking post-Winter Soldierizing Bucky. Iron Man's
am.
never had a child sidekick. Besides, that wasn't a cancerous tumor.
He has like
literally.
He has like kids into the Avengers before though.
I suppose that is true.
And he does give lots of children temporary Avenger badges, although those are in the more recent comics, where like if they're in real danger, they can call them the Avengers.
Shout out to, everybody that was on the Champions.
Everybody.
Man, I need to finish the Champions at some point. That looked like a fun time.
You want to know who I think Squirrel Girl would hang out with well in the Marvel Universe, in the comics?
Kamala?
The Runaways.
Oh, the Runaways.
They're also not extremely well known, although they did get a live action TV series, which just fucked up all the plots.
I thought you were gonna say it slapped.
No. I did not like it.
It started out pretty good, I felt. It was towards the end of the...
I liked the first episode. And then I realized... No, I liked the first episode. And then I realized the persons they were making the bad guys... Because in the comics... Spoilers. In the comics, you have the children who find out their parents are all part of a cult that sacrifices people. They've watched their parents kill somebody. They realize they gotta run away because their parents are superpowered freaks who are super rich and basically control all of Los Angeles or wherever it is they live. San Francisco, somewhere. I don't remember. Somewhere on the West Coast. And then they run away from home. And their parents are trying to chase them down and, like, bring them back because they made deals with extra-dimensional beings who, when they sacrifice enough souls, those extra-dimensional beings will break free and then save 6 people. So the 6 people they've chosen to save are their kids, because each one had 1 child. Each pair of adults had 1 child. And that was the deal. But, they're extra-dimensional beings who have been manipulating the world this whole time and showed the parents how powerful their powers are and convinced them that it's the end of the world, so you might as well be villains for us. Which does not excuse their actions whatsoever, but kind of makes sense. And in the TV series, I stopped watching and I realized, oh, the one set of alien parents out of everybody are the big bad villains who are sacrificing a bunch of people to revive Carolina's grandfather. They made the aliens the bad guys instead of, oh, yeah, no, all the parents are just real shitty and they're working for extra dimensional beings. You have an alien set, you have a set of mutants, you've got some regular people who are super tech geniuses, time travelers, yeah, but they all got bribed by the same group. Nah, it's just gonna be the aliens, because aliens are bad in Marvel live-action TV series. Which,
That
interesting.
if it's any consolation, this isn't Supergirl. The aliens aren't getting like coded as a minority group. They're mostly getting coded as televangelists.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help because in the book, in the comics, Carolina's royalty. And in the show, I didn't watch very far because I realized what they were doing in the second episode and I stopped watching, so I'm not 100% caught up on it. But in the show, it looks like the fact that they're royalty is why they're bad and that they bribed the other parents. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where it looked like it was going. I wasn't down for that.
It's bad because he's a bad dude. Like when her grandpa comes back, he's like a bad dude and clearly not like a guy worth supporting.
Why the fuck would anybody support him then? At least with like the extra dimensional beings, they convince them that, hey, we have the power to destroy the world. We're gonna break free sooner or later. If you help us, we won't kill your kids. That makes sense to me, because then you have something over them. And then somebody gets greedy and is like, well, fuck all my friends. I'm just gonna save the girl I have a crush on and my parents. But I mean, it's a comics. You're gonna have dickheads in the group.
I genuinely cannot remember what the overarching motivation of the parents is in the first season. I checked out like at the end of season 2 or 3 when I realized that this wasn't going to be a tight miniseries. So this was something they were just going to like keep inventing new nonsense conflicts to keep it going endlessly. And that's something I just don't have the energy for.
Did they ever introduce Xavier? I don't remember what his first name was when he got introduced in the series, but basically he's Skrull royalty and he's engaged to Carolina, and he goes out of his way to make her feel comfortable as she comes to discover her sexuality.
I don't think so. I think I don't think that we see any. I mean, the
sad.
Skrulls like weren't around until Captain Marvel, and I'm sure they wouldn't have been allowed to play with them. They're a very limited tool set. Like the parents are not. They don't have the
That
cool
also means they
like
probably
layout.
didn't
Every
include Doctor Doom's robot son, and he's literally
nope,
one of the
no
best
Doctor
characters.
Doom's robot son.
He's literally one of the best characters in the whole
No.
series. But I feel like
Julie Power.
Getting back to the point, I feel like Squirrel Girl would fit in with the Runaways. I mean, she has better family dynamic than the Runaways do. Lucky her. But they also aren't big on like joining any of the big organizations. They kind of just want to help the people they see and then keep to themselves because they're tired of being manipulated and used as pawns. And while she doesn't say that's her exact reason for avoiding the other teams, she's also doesn't seem keen on joining anyone. The only two teams you really see her in is her college group of friends, which kind of forms naturally on its own. It's not her searching for a group. It's her just wanting to make college friends. And hey, we're all heroes. Cool. And then I don't know what the GDX group is at the end of the Squirrel Girl Fights the Universe. Where, okay, that's another thing. So at the end of the Squirrel Girl beats up the Marvel Universe. Oh, nope, it's not at the end of that one. It's at the end of the other one. At the end of currently Squirrel, you know it's to be true. You get introduced to a different team she was a part of that she saw for Christmas. And I don't know any of them. Then you see her quickly...
It's another old appearance.
Yeah, it's another old appearance. And then you have another old appearance where she gets invited to a poker game held by the thing where all the big time Marvel superheroes are just playing poker and gambling, and like Ben has to lecture someone on doing high stakes when it's just supposed to be casual fun for all the heroes. And then Reed gets called out asking if he's cheating, and he's like, nah, why would I let my wife walk around invisible while we're playing cards? We're heroes after all. Then you have Hank Pym literally cheating with his wife helping her. But that's all casual background stuff that caught my eye. What really is interesting is she's a teenager in this too. Ben calls her a child twice. So why the fuck did they invite a child to their poker night?
Shoot, I don't know.
There's a lot of instances where they bring up how young she is, and then they're like, well, you're young, so you can't do this thing. And then they let her do the thing.
I mean, clearly, like, they're not gambling with, I have trouble believing they're gambling with actual large sums of money.
Yes,
One has
they
to
are.
assume that this is all just fun. I mean, yes, Hercules and what's-his-face are, but Thing says, hey, no big side bets. This is for fun.
Yeah, and then you have Doctor Strange in the corner with a huge pile of money right in front of Wolverine. No huge
Because he's
side
winning
bets.
all the fake chips.
What's your huge side bet?
He's just taking all of Wolverine's, like, preset amount of chips. That's all. That's all.
Also,
Don't worry about it.
Also, another
You
good
keep going back to
contrast.
these old... I can't live with these old throwbacks.
No, okay, you gave me these. These have throwbacks. I want to talk about all that I read about Squirrel Girl. Okay, this is why when I said for Supernatural next week we're doing it season by season. You have the first season to get through. It's gonna be rough. It's gonna be fun. But like,
I don't see what the two have to do with each other.
there's another instance of Squirrel Girl and Spider-Man contrasting each other in this instance, because Spider-Man's gambling too, and Nackmore asked him, I'm so glad I remembered his fucking name. Nackmore asked him, I thought you had a new costume. He's like, wanna see? It'll cost you $20. He's trying to earn that money. He's trying to have a good fucking time. Squirrel Girl, meanwhile, is just trying to help her friends work with everyone. Like, she's like, don't worry about us. We're supposed to be here, right, Grimm? And then Grimm, like, repeats her joke to everybody and gets them all to laugh, and she's just happy to fit in. And Peter's on the side just trying to make some fucking money.
It's a fun moment. I'm a big fan of the Thing as well.
It's a fun moment. There's lots of instances where, hey, child, you can't do this because you're a child and it's not safe or right. And then like, oh, hey, it's the child. Let's let her do the thing. I can't be responsible for your safety. Let me go throw you in with some other superheroes.
I guess that was just part of the joke when she was just a one-note character.
I can believe that. Ooh.
Yeah. I can't parse the Z-list Marvel joke stuff.
Maybe
That's why I don't go to the old stuff too often.
That's fair, but you gave me the books, told me to read them, so I read all of them. Like, even the small stuff. I
can't fault you for reading them. I'm just saying that, like, in terms of analysis and appreciation, that stuff goes. I appreciate what I can, and I walk away from the rest.
Someone in chat said maybe they think she matures at the rate of Squirrel years. But I think it's very obvious that she doesn't.
I mean, like, as a character, she's been around for, what is it at this point, 44 years or so? No, that's not right.
One of them made
29 years? 29?
One of them
29
made
years.
Stories about her when they're all just waiting in the tower, waiting to be saved. Talks about her around the time when she first would have been introduced, and Nancy's just like, what? No, she's my age, clearly. It's like they're trying to make sure you forget about the old versions of her for this new one that's more fun and well developed.
That timeline does not add up, Taylor. You cannot tell the good people at home that that's how the timeline adds up. This old woman is like in her 60s. The 90s would have been a lot earlier if we're talking about the woman's childhood.
No.
I can't abide that. I can't abide. I can't abide
No, when
that.
they're all in the tower pretending to have stories of Squirrel Girl. This old woman claims to have a
Yeah, I know what
story
you're talking about.
of her when Squirrel Girl was younger.
No, when the woman talking was younger.
No, when Squirrel Girl was younger.
Yes. That's why it's all framed in like that super old-fashioned,
That
Ben-Day
was
dot
supposed to be when
style.
the woman
Yeah.
was young too. I thought it was just supposed to be when like
Yeah,
Squirrel
now
Girl
that
was younger. I just
it
thought it
says
was
it, she says it right there. Now this story happened way back when I was just a little girl.
Oh, no, I that went over my head.
Checkmate.
Okay, fair. I'll give you that. You're right about that. That went over my head.
Checkmate.
I thought it was supposed to be like a throwback to old Squirrel Girl and how you shouldn't think about that too much.
I like that interpretation though. I think it's just mostly a throwback to like old you know, kingly times or whatever old Marvel comics used to be called.
Ah, man. This is a ride. I want to see
I mean, it's
more. I want to see more parallels between her and Spidey and Iron Man because that is literally who she has the most side interactions with. It's literally who they're constantly comparing her to and giving her similar plot points as. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it because she doesn't take shit as seriously as either of them. Like Iron Man is one of my favorite comic book characters because I like who he becomes after he faces serious issues. I like who he becomes in his character arc versus how he starts out as. Does he do everything right? No. But still, he's one of my favorite comic book characters. He has been since I was a kid. I'm fucking biased. Oh well. But at least I own my biases, Fox News. I'm
that was a
sorry.
weird left turn for
I'm
us.
sorry. I'm sorry. We were talking about fascism earlier, and I saw a report about how Fox News is trying to like slowly turn away from Trump. So there's other right news that are popping up because Fox News won't cover the way they wanted them to when Trump lost. And it's my mind jumped there because Fox News is like, "What? No, we've always been unbiased. What do you mean?"
Ugh,
So
get him.
that's where that's coming from because I was watching the news earlier. But no, she's fun. She's a Mary Sue in the most literal sense. But she's fun about it. She doesn't like throw around her intelligence. She doesn't like try and make her other friends feel stupid. She doesn't make fun of their abilities even when like people are making fun of hers. She's just trying to have fun and I love it. She's spunky and she's here. She's got a lot of fucking energy. She's got a lot of energy. But
She does.
she has so much.
I think what
kind of wondering if that's why you wanted me to read her first.
I like I think you're picking up on a lot of what I like about her. I like her kindness and her empathy and just overall like the way that she's compared to, that you're drawing like these connections between her and Iron Man and Spider-Man, her being a Mary Sue, but how they kind of use that to good effect generally. I think that all comes together with I
Continue,
think that all
continue.
comes together with like just the overarching idea. One of the big ideas I love about her is just what if superhero, but we did good, but we did it better. What could superheroes look like if they were better than what superheroes are? I think that's
I know why
one
you
of the
like her
big
so
things that she
much.
does.
I know why
Uh-oh.
you like her so much. You like her so much because she's basically what you always wanted superheroes to be because your favorite Batman movie is the Adam West one where he's a fucking Gary Sue, always has an answer, and things are just fun and high energy. That's why you like Squirrel Girl because that's your preferred type of hero.
The fact that the Adam West TV series is my favorite iteration of Batman. Well, second favorite. My absolute favorite is
Also, your favorite movie.
George Clooney's Batman and Robin, which is yes, actually, if you put a gun to my head and I had to give a favorite movie real quickly, that would probably be what I say.
Mine is the
Like,
one with Mr. Freeze in it, and he's played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. because it's
We have the same favorite one.
I don't remember the names of them. So, well, no, my favorite Batman movie is the one where it's the animated one where he faces death and he constantly has to go back to the
Oh,
graveyard. That's my favorite, but
oh
then
my gosh.
out of the live action ones, it's the Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze because that's my favorite villain out of all the Batman live action movies. I don't like any of
Phantasm is the
them.
classic favorite.
Phantasm
I think
is
my
fucking
favorite animated
amazing.
my my favorite animated would probably be Lego Batman, which is yeah, more of the same like Adam West, Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. Let's take superheroes and do them with high levels of camp. And regarding like the latter two, or the more recent two, let's do superheroes but good and better and with like wholesomeness and an attempt to like have like, you know, empathy
You want to know what
and
comic
family.
series you could pluck Squirrel Girl out of and put her in and she would just fit right in? The
Ooh,
Lumberjanes. She would fit in with the Lumberjanes comics.
I keep hearing that I need to read Lumberjanes.
It's really good. I met the creator at PopCon one year. That was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
I had only read one of them up until that point, and then she talked about how she writes women and how one of the most common questions she gets is, oh, why aren't there any boys in their comics? Because this was before, I don't know if any male characters have been introduced, but this was before any of them were, when there was only a few issues out. And she's like, because I don't want to. This isn't about guys. This is about girls. This is about the Lumberjanes. And I love it. They're
Get
really
'em.
good. And Squirrel Girl would fit right in with them. They're also high energy and really fun, and they have their serious moments, but you would really like those. I would recommend them. I haven't read them in a
Maybe we have to
while.
turn that. Oh,
That's another
could
episode.
that be an episode?
That could be an
That's another
episode.
episode, I think. I'd look forward to that.
It's
I
really
th-
nice.
I just like I think right now, especially when we're dealing with fascism in the real world, as we keep bringing up and trying not, as we keep bringing up, when
Yeah.
we have a genre that tends to lend itself to fascist thinking so readily, like Iron Man, like so much of mainstream Marvel, so
Yeah.
like much of mainstream DC, basically any superhero movie, it's nice to see people that are answering the question, like, hey, can superheroes be made good? Can they not have fascisms? Perhaps. And the answer is like, hey, all this campy superhero nonsense that like the edgelords of the 90s like to throw away as trash. That might have our answer if we go back and approach this with empathy and love and
Like
an intentionality.
like don't get me wrong, some of the old comics make me cringe, but that's because a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of old comics are really bad with women. They're really bad with women.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They're so bad with women. So I prefer newer comics to the older ones, just because the women are written better. But there is something to be said about the old fun feel of superheroes before everything had to be so drastic. And like some people were like, "Oh, I could do this cool thing. I want to help. Can I help?" Like that. There's something to be said about that, and there are perks to it. Someone said we need a tangent counter, and I just have to say, if we got a tangent counter, we would. Are we also going to have a timer to count how long each tangent was? Because then we could just go and see what's the longest tangent gonna be. Also,
I'll add it to my list as I'm editing. I will once we've gotten
I'm so
our product
sorry. I'm so
our
sorry.
production our production line needs a little bit more streamlining, but if we can get things down to a point where it's a few button clicks for me to get our podcast audio version uploaded, I could add like a little ding every time we go on a big old tangent, just to let people know that that's one of those things starting.
Yeah. Also, how would you both feel about a Squirrel Girl show? It depends on who's writing it. Like, I could see the people, like the. There's a woman who writes for The Boys who wrote that scene where they beat the shit, spoilers, out of a Nazi. I could see her doing a good Squirrel Girl show because she writes the women on The Boys really fucking well. And while The Boys is far more serious than Squirrel Girl and is not meant to be camp much at all, they have fun. There's lots of fun jokes in The Boys that I could see being explored more on Squirrel Girl because it
I
doesn't
think
have to be serious.
I kind of tend to agree, and I haven't seen The Boys. There's another potential episode. But hey, on the subject of, media that's superhero based that wants to comment on superheroes and fascism and real world fascism,
Oh
The
God.
Boys knocking it out of the park right now, as I
Oh,
understand
okay.
it.
Yes, they are. They are by far doing the best on that. The second season's far better than the first season. The first season was really hard to get through. It was very depressing. It was not what was needed when it came out. It had a
Mhm.
lot to say on superheroes. It said what it needed to say, and it had lots of great points. But it came out during a time where lots of people were dealing with like real world fascism and other things, so there wasn't as many jokes in it as much as serious content. And like we're still dealing with those things, but they upped the jokes. They upped the jokes. They gave more soft moments between characters where it wasn't constantly fighting and killing and hunting and trying to survive while still not dropping the ball on real world issues. But yeah, the boys are knocking it out of the park. I really, again, their second season is far better than the first season, but they needed all that serious stuff to like set up for moments of levity in the second one. So you would be aware of how much shit they're covering. But also, there's other superhero media that's not knocking it out of the park right now, especially comics. I thought
Really?
you were gonna bring up some of them. So, yeah. Um, from what I've heard, and again, I don't read comics as soon as they come out. I'm typically a bit behind, but there's been some issues with DCs lately where like people feel like they aren't doing as much as they could be. And you also have to deal with the
Mhm.
fact that Disney owns Marvel now, and so a lot of the Marvel series that are coming out are not focusing on real world issues as directly as like the boys are. Because the boys are talking about
That's
how the rise of Nazis are coming back and directly comparing certain groups of people to Nazis because hey, look, they are Nazis. They're neo Nazis and like they're not afraid to like hide away from that or point out how like they've never disappeared completely. They've always still been around. And so
it's definitely
it's knocking it out of the park. It's done by
it's definitely
Amazon, which but it's got some good points.
You're very right. I hadn't even thought about how that just tendency, your proximity to Disney decreases like the politics of your superhero media.
Yes.
Like even just like a hop of the pond over to the CWDC stuff is much more radical than anything Disney's put out.
Yes, it is.
The CW, the CW is more radical.
Well, like this.
I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Well, CW. I think CW is the one that releases Supernatural. I think Supernatural also gets released on CW, and they finally let a gay character be announced. That's not fair. There are several gay characters in Supernatural. It's just they're all dead.
Hey, that brings up an interesting little thing to bring it back. My answer, just long and short, yeah, I'd like a Squirrel Girl TV show, and the same. Who's writing it is all that it matters really to me. I
Yeah.
think it just takes good direction and people that get it
Would you
and
prefer
want to
it?
do the right tone.
Would you prefer it live or animated?
Oh, animated, I think, would be my preference, just because animation tends to, I think, lend itself better to stylism, and I think
Animation
people are afraid of
also
doing live action stylism.
animation also tends to get away with certain jokes that won't get away in live with live television.
Mm,
Um, just gonna throw my hat out there to all those moments in the Avengers animated series where like those jokes would not have been made in a live action version. They would have been cut out of the movies. There's lots of like little like nods and judge and like nudges here and there to shit that are happening real world that just would never have flown anywhere else. But yeah,
on the
I think animated would be better than live, but I could see live working out too. They would need an actor who could keep up that high energy though.
on the subject of uh, queer representation in superhero media, did you? I'm curious. There's a bit of it in Squirrel Girl, and they don't ever talk
So
about it, but it's
Nancy,
there, and you
right?
can't, and it's like,
So Nancy,
what?
right? Is Nancy LGBTQ
Ah,
plus?
not. It's possible. I don't know if they've ever mentioned that explicitly, but there is one character that like is running around and you don't realize it unless you know what you're looking for, and you only know what you're looking for if you are also a trans man or somebody else that wears a binder.
Oh,
Koi
you're talking
Boy,
about Koi
when he
Boy.
runs around,
Yeah, when he runs around in his underwear.
yeah,
I noticed that.
when he runs around,
It
I just
looked
it's
it
in.
looked like a flat sports bra, and most of the bras I wear are flat sports bras. So
Hmm.
I just assumed he enjoyed clothing like that. I didn't realize he was supposed
Hmm.
to be. I didn't realize he was trans. But that's pretty cool.
They're they're very yeah they it I I don't know where people in the viewing audience stand on the subject. I think that you need, representation of all types,
Yeah.
including ones that are just there. And like, it doesn't help that Koi Boy is the only trans man I can think of that's a superhero, like at all. I know that they had Dreamer and Supergirl, but that was a trans woman. I think I don't know. I like it. I think it's cool, and I think it's very much represents that sort of a lot of the vibe that they're going for in Squirrel Girl.
I didn't notice that. I didn't make that connection. Like I said, I just assumed he enjoyed wearing sports bras because that's what I went with it. But that is pretty cool. You're right though. I can't really think of another one. Not from like the main two. Not from Marvel or DC. Um, actually, all the ones
Yeah,
coming
from
back
the
are
main two, big asterisks there.
yeah. Well, they're the two biggest and well known. That's what I say from the main
Yeah, yeah,
two. But
yeah. I know. I'm just. You're absolutely right. That's the big like addendum to add
you
to
said
these
like
statements.
you said asterisks there, so I just wasn't sure. But that is interesting. I was kind of waiting for Nancy to get herself a girlfriend because that's just
You-
like there's a few instances where she's talking to Doreen where I thought maybe she had a
Yeah.
crush on Squirrel Girl. But when she
Oh
finds
yeah.
out Squirrel Girl has a crush on Tomas, they stop. And just goes back to being just friends, just casual friends. So I was kind of waiting to see what was going on with that. I don't know if that happens in any of the later comics or not, but I just want Nancy. I just want Nancy to be happy. Nancy is amazing. She deserves all the happiness in the world. Also, you're completely right. They could show more varieties of LGBTQ plus characters in comics. If you read independent comics, you get a lot more of them. Dimension Noir, which is something we're going to be doing another episode on, it's a comic that you can read completely on webtoons. I read it when it first came out from an independent artist who I also met at PopCon and brought the first two brought two of the first copies of their first two books on the series. That's how I found out about it. And it has a trans male character who's a main character in that, plus a polyamorous throuple. Throuple is when there's three of them, right?
Trouble, I think.
Throuple. Okay. I don't know all the terms, so forgive me. I'm still learning them. But it's just a bunch of LGBTQ characters in that, and you find that with a lot more independent comics than you do with the main like. Oh, look at that! Marvel and DC are making a big deal out of it, and those characters are going to do what? Little to nothing. Little to nothing.
Every time, every
Every
time.
time, every time. But yeah, Dimension Noir, which is a comic series we are going to be doing another episode on. It's so good. It's so good. It's a sci-fi fantasy. It's got dimension traveling. It's got magic. It's got trans main characters. It's got fucking gay main characters. It has pansexual and bisexual main characters. It is amazing.
Yes,
if you're
everything.
looking for if you're looking for comics with LGBTQ like really positive representation, like, and they don't make a big deal out of it. they're just part of a character's history, or they're part of like the relationship dynamic between three characters who are interested in each other. Well, two of them are interested. They used to be in a relationship, and now they're both interested in the same person. And so, yeah, it's really good. It's free on Webtoons. It's called Dimension Noir. I recommend buying the physical copies of the books, but that's just because I'm currently in the process of buying the last three of them. Well, I have the third. I need the last two. I need the last two.
I look forward to checking them out. It's also why I'm so desperately pounding through my own back memory catalog. So what cool indie stuff can I share? Because I really don't want it to just be sound boosting big mega corporation stuff. Even though I know that's what a lot of this show is going to be.
Well,
I would
yeah,
like
but
us to take the time to really share.
it's a lot of pop culture talking and introducing each other to things that influenced us, especially when we were younger. Like, our next episode is going to be Supernatural. I've been watching Supernatural for 12 years. It's a fucking huge, big pop culture thing, and it's indie now. And, like, so of course, it's. Of course, it's going to be something I would want to talk about on podcast since you haven't seen it. One of yours things for me to watch is Babylon 5, which has a cult following and had a huge influence on sci-fi that I didn't watch because my mom thought it was boring, and so she just never showed me it. So it makes sense that we're going to start off with topics like that, especially at the beginning of a podcast. We want people to tune in. Like, Squirrel Girl was kind of a risky start because not a lot of people know about her. She has a niche following. I'm not surprised we talked about her for this long, but I'm also not surprised by how many tangents we went off on. Because Squirrel Girl is surprisingly super political. Like I said, they just throw that shit out there as if it's so obvious. And it feels like what it used to be with Captain America. Because in Captain America comics, they threw that stuff out there like, yeah, this is clearly bad. This isn't up for discussion. This is wrong. And Squirrel Girl does the same thing, and I miss that in comics, because now comics are like, well, there are two sides to everything, which you often get on news reports, because you're not supposed to show biases. But here's newsflash. Everyone has biases. Even when you're trying to write from an unbiased point of view, you already have bias. Unless you are approaching something with absolutely no opinion on a matter whatsoever, then who you're first learning about it from, you're going to get bias from. Either for their point or against their point. Like, there's no way to write completely from an apathetical standpoint. Not entirely. And I wish comics would, like, just acknowledge there are some things that are absolutely wrong. More. Because they used to have they have a long, rich history of doing that, but you don't see it as often or as blatantly as, like, the old Captain America comics had it. Or as in Squirrel Girl fucking has it. Also, some of that millennial nihilism.
We stand Nancy. We stand Nancy.
We stand Nancy. We stand Nancy. Nancy's amazing.
I hadn't really thought of that before. The way that, like, modern, like, hey, we keep trashing on it. Let's do it a bit more. Like, event books like Civil War, Civil War II, Secret Wars, all that other nonsense, like, especially the Civil Wars, are so built around, like, this pick a side on this big political debate and then have fun supporting the heroes that are on your side of this political debate, and then we'll end it and it won't matter. And both sides kind of had a point, but also one of them was super fascist and the other was super fascist, but in kind of a different way, because they both had to be justifiably bad to keep things compelling. Like, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah,
no.
It's trash. Have, like, good ideas in politics and be willing to stand by and, like, vocal about your beliefs in your stories.
Modern comics have a lot of issues with doing this, and, like, if you look at the evolution of Doctor Doom, you can see just how clear it's becoming. Because if you look at Victor Von Doom, he's a character who, it's not that his background has changed a lot, it's just that more has been added onto it a lot. He's a leader of a sovereign country, who has immunity anytime he visits any other country and can break any law whatsoever. But it went from, hey, he has immunity for certain, like, laws like real politicians have to like he can get away with anything, even murder, and you can't arrest him because he's got diplomatic immunity. It went from a commentary on how diplomatic immunity can be abused and why it's sometimes important to, oh no, that's just like part of the background now. We have no real commentary on that, and he just gets to do whatever he wants. Because he's Victor Von Doom. Sorry, my baby boy woke up because I was yelling about Victor Von Doom, and he wanted pets.
Oh boy.
But yeah,
I
no,
don't.
and that's just the most obvious example I can think of it right now. Because, and I'm not trying to say everything was better in the good old days, because I'll shit on old comics all day. Like I will. There's a lot of things they do wrong. Look at any female character in the 90s or before.
Fraggin'
Like, there are
That's one thing
issues
we.
with them
Oh, sorry.
too. But, oh, I've been talking a lot. Feel free to interrupt me at any point in time. I was just gonna, like, summarize what I was saying, like, they're not perfect either, but where they were bad at writing, like, certain kinds of characters, women, people of color, LGBTQ, like, taking real stances on certain human rights issues, which come back to being bad at writing people of color and women, they were more direct with worldwide issues that were getting talked about. There was a lot of old comics that have commentary on colonialism, on World War II, on Nazis, on fascism, and there's also a lot that have some things to say about communism and socialism that I don't completely agree with, but you know where they stood and what they were trying to comment on. New comics take the stance that has become more well known and accepted, as in, like, everybody has a view. Try and write from all views because nothing is entirely evil except for, like, murder and old Nazis. And that's just, no, there are things that are just morally fucking awful, no matter how you look at it. And yes, I'm talking about neo-Nazis again. And fascism.
The thing when you try to have this like when you try to aim for like we're gonna mold out the politics or we're gonna have like a little bit of everybody had good points, it really does kind of it makes this uncomfortable. It cancels everything cancels out and you're left with this mushy gunk that doesn't feel pleasant at any point because
Doesn't
it's
feel
still
like it
got a
has a
clear.
point.
Yeah, it doesn't have a point. It just has like the politics it doesn't think that it has, and it's just there, and it doesn't, and it's just dumb and kind of just hard to sit with. It's just like gross.
That's okay. Yes, and I agree.
That
I'm just
that's
wanna
like at the worst examples.
yeah. I want to comment on something that was mentioned in the chat, and I'm gonna bring it back to Squirrel Girl because all of this does connect directly back to Squirrel Girl. Um, Sly said, "I'm getting the vibe that the old cliche "victors write the history" is playing into comic writing." And you're sort of correct. It's not that victors write the history, but so much bigger companies are buying out comics now. They're buying out comic companies. So when like Marvel first started, it was small and they could be more direct on certain issues without having to worry about a big company needing to support them and approve of everything. Now you have big companies like Disney and Amazon buying the rights to make comic series or to comic companies themselves, and now they have to get approval from the biggest, from not the biggest, but like from the higher ups. And so they can't take as much risk in upsetting people or making them uncomfortable with reading their materials anymore. Because it still has to fly from the other, it still has to fly by the moderators and it still has to get approved. That's why in indie comics you see a lot more risks taken, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But you still get the point of them. And that's one of many reasons why I think indie comics are better than mainstream comics. But maybe that's just a hipster point of view. But this all ties back to Squirrel Girl, because Squirrel Girl, while she has that old campy vibe, she also gets to just flat out say, yeah, no, this is bad. Without it interrupting the plot or feeling out of place, or like, again, there's a whole issue of fascism where her clone becomes a fascist, like Iron Man became a fascist in the Civil War arc, the further down the path he went. And she's just like, I agree with your beginning points, I understand where the thoughts are coming from, but this draws a line in the sand is wrong. That's just morally wrong. And then she sticks by that, and it feels fitting, and it doesn't feel forced, and it feels like the comic has a point. And it's not even that serious of an issue in the comic themselves. But when you realize what the undertones are, it becomes more serious. But it doesn't feel like you're getting a history lecture. Or like a morality debate. At least. That's my thoughts.
I think there's so much that I like about this, and I like about its politics. I think the one sort of weak point of the stuff that we went through was actually in the graphic novel. I felt where when because there has to come a point where they have to explain. So hey, why is it your clone decided to do a fascism? Why is it you aren't doing a fascism? And the explanation, which comes from Tony, but is still, because they all kind of speak with the same general tone as we've discussed, there's sort of, they all kind of get that same level of narrative authenticity. Like, you kind of get the sense that they all have the same relative level of accurate perspective that any character can be expected to have, so you can't kind of throw it away as like, oh, that's just somebody with a bad perspective. They all kind of generally have a good perspective on when they're saying something.
Yeah, because they're
Tony's
all
explanation
basically
is
Squirrel
that
Girl in the Squirrel Girl comics. Except for Peter
that's
Parker,
yeah.
who is
So
still Peter Parker somehow. He's the only one who escapes.
so Tony's explanation is that the clone lacks the ability to compromise. When she thinks she's right, nothing else matters. Which is kind of a part of fascism, sort of, and kind of explains it, but it's also smacks to me, if I can sort of give my full kind of anxieties here, it kind of smacks to me of the same sort of centristy, both sides have a point isms. And that's not to say that I don't think Squirrel Girl's defining characteristic is her ability to compromise. I don't think she compromises, really, ever. She doesn't let herself compromise morally. She doesn't really abide it when other people do. Her ability is to empathize. The ability to reach out and say, hey, Hippo the man who's threatening to take a bank, to rob an entire bank, as in lift it up and walk away with it. I think that there are problems that you're facing in your life that are leading you to make this decision. And I think that if somebody with a degree of compassion and patience sat down with you, we could work through them and provide you better choices. I think that's what defines her. And I think that's part of what makes her stand out, even among the Adam West Batmans and, the other, like, superheroes but better. That I think is what makes her unique. And I think that it's a pity that the writer, Ryan North himself, either didn't feel like he could explain all of that in a throwaway line, or doesn't really appreciate it himself.
So I think Squirrel Girl herself in that issue actually gives a better explanation than Tony. Because you're right, Tony tries to explain it away, because of course Tony does. He's fucking Tony. He's gonna try and explain everything. Again, I'm not shitting on Iron Man just to shit on Iron Man. He is my favorite, one of my two favorite comic characters. The other one being another morally questionable one.
Lovingly critique the things you love. That's part of loving it, like, wholly and properly.
Yes, that's part of loving it. You got to be able to critique it, or else you have this idealized version of it that just doesn't work. Squirrel Girl herself gives a better answer, and it's not even directly to the question of why isn't she doing the same thing as her clone. It's that I don't want to hurt people because I wouldn't want people to hurt me. She literally says it's just basic sympathy. It's not even empathy to the point where she can feel the same thing they feel, because in the old comics you see a history of people bullying her for being a mutant, which is very common in Marvel because X-Men is just a metaphor for any group. Pick a group. X-Men's a metaphor for it. It literally works with any downtrodden group. But she doesn't want people to keep treating her that way. That's why when Spider-Man makes fun of her friends, she says, you can make fun of me, but not my friends. And then that's when she finally punches him, even though he's under the control of somebody else. And she doesn't go out of her way to hurt him, like, extremely. It's just to get him and the others to stop. Because once this fight started, it wasn't going to stop until there was a victor. But yeah, it's just basic sympathy. She doesn't want to be treated that way. Why would she treat other people that way? And yeah, it would be better for squirrels, but then squirrels could end up becoming just like the humans. There's a lot of points where they bring back how, oh, it's time for the squirrels to rise, just like, and humans to die off like the dinosaurs. It happens in the fascism arc with her clone, but it also happens in the Asgardian arc with a Rataskir. I am not saying that right, but I genuinely do not have any idea how to say it.
I have an Icelandic aunt. I will ask her, and at the start of our next episode, I can like play back audio of her saying it in the actual original Icelandic, so we know what it's supposed to be.
Cool. I did not think to look up the pronunciation of that, and that's on me. I should have looked it up. But yeah, no, even then, one of her biggest pulls away is that it's time for the squirrels to rule because humans are like dinosaurs. They've harmed the planet too much. It's time to die, despite the fact that dinosaurs didn't really harm the planet too much. They really couldn't. They didn't have the machines we have. But several times, humans are compared to dinosaurs, and Squirrel Girl is left with the moral decision of humans or squirrels. And every single time, she's just like, I'm not going to choose because I don't have to. Things are pretty good right now. They could be better because, like, the climate sucks, but I mean, killing everyone isn't gonna fix that right off the bat. Like, you're gonna have to kill everyone, and that's wrong. That's wrong. And wow, shocking. It's wrong to murder. And it's not even that she always asks questions first from her villains before fighting. Because with Hippo the Hippo, she fights first. She fights him while asking questions because she has this kind of like... She points this out in Spider-Man. I like the whole gimmick you do where you talk and joke while fighting. Which is basically what Joker does in the Batman comics too, and something Jason Todd points out in him. But, she points that out, and she says how she likes it, but he doesn't get down to the same thing she gets down when she does the same thing, because she asks Hippo the Hippo, why are you doing this? Spider-Man doesn't ask that, unless it's someone he knew personally who went evil, like Doc Ock. And that's only right at the beginning. It doesn't really get asked after that much. With Rataskir, Ratatasker, I don't know. She asked her questions the entire time they're fighting, but she fights first because they made everyone else aggressive first. Hippo the Hippo charged at her first, but she punched first. And she's not afraid, so she's not afraid to land the first hit. She's definitely willing to get her hands dirty. It's not even that she has like this moral superiority where like, I won't land the first punch when I think something's wrong. Like, some of the other characters try to pull off in their comics, like, I won't throw the first punch because I don't want to start the fight, but I will end the fight. When that's bullshit. Because the fight doesn't always start with the first punch thrown. But yeah, she just has basic sympathy practice. She just knows how to implement it. That's what I like best about her character. Again, she's a Mary Sue, but it's fitting for the stories they're trying to tell. They're not making her go up against someone she's going to have to murder. She could have murdered Galactus, but then she's like, oh no, I'm definitely not powerful enough to beat him, so let's just talk and chill. I don't understand why they started the whole comic with her on top of him and then moved backwards through the story to get right back to that point. That was kind of annoying when they could have just shown it all. But it's a gimmick.
Shake out.
Everything about Squirrel Girl is a gimmick, and some of them are done really well.
It's solid. I'm so glad to hear that you liked it so much, and I'm so glad to hear that so much of it, the cool stuff in it resonated with you
Yeah.
because I don't know. I think that's the ultimate goal here with this as a project is just to like it says on the tin, find the things we love and share it and talk about it because it's a lot of cool stuff out there.
I am so sorry that I have interrupted you so much. I am going to try and get better at it the longer we do the stream. That's why I put my finger up to my lip earlier to keep myself from interrupting you because you had a point, and I know you had a point. And I'm not trying to be rude. I do care about what you have to say. I just have a bad habit. And I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I do too. I think we're both interrupting each other a lot, and I'm trying to stop too because this is really your episode to shine. You're the person new to this, and I think your opinion is the key
Dude,
one
you're gonna
here.
tear into Supernatural, and I can't wait.
It's gonna be
It's
solid.
gonna
I
be
look I
so
look
fun.
forward to it. It's on if we can do one second to last tangent. I can't. We've
Go
got to wrap
ahead.
this up soon, but I've got two last tangents here. One is just on the subject of interrupting. I remember back in the summer when we were at the height of the protests, seeing video or like on Twitter just of this one group of this open discussion that formed in the middle of a street at a protest, and the one rule was, hey, if you interrupt somebody, get up and leave. And someone was like, yeah, and by the end of the conversation, there weren't any guys left, and that stuck with me for a while now. So I apologize too. The more cognizant of it I've become, the more I realize, wow, I'm really bad at waiting for pauses in conversations. I'm glad everybody around me is so patient.
I'm bad at reading them. So a lot of the times I'm interrupting people, it's because I think they're done because that sounded like an endless
Hmm.
sentence to me, and then they're just taking a breather because I talk quickly. I talk quickly about a lot of stuff constantly. If I'm done with a sentence, I quickly move on to the next one. This is how I'm used to talking. I grew up in a household full of people with ADD and ADHD. This is how they all talk. Um, so when I hear other people pause when they're just trying to gather their thoughts, I assume they're done, so I try to respond and I often interrupt. That's where a lot of it comes from. Not all of it. That's not the only reason. I know that's not the only reason. But this is where a lot of it comes from. And I am trying to get better at reading when people are actually done or when they're just pausing. So we've all got stuff to work on, bud.
On so many levels, but I'm glad where we came here. I was a bit worried at the start, but I think we've come to a really good point. I'm feeling a lot more confident about this as a show. If I have one more thing to say about the comic,
Go
just
for
to
it.
we talk so much about the writing, but I did make a point at the beginning to read off all the other cool people that are involved in it, and
Oh,
because
yes,
comics are
the
a team
art.
effort,
The
and
art.
the art. And I can't there's so much cool stuff that happens with the lettering, especially in the later issues that you just have to read to see really.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the cart and character design, it's like nothing else you've ever seen in a superhero comic,
I
especially from the big two.
I really love Squirrel Girl's design in this. Like,
She's
oh my gosh! And
mm,
if we go back to the pajamas part, because when I was reading the comic and they were all running around in their pajamas because they had to ditch their costumes, I don't remember why right off the bat. I can't remember if that was the Ratiskir thing or if it was the fascism. Might have been the fascism issue. Can't remember. But when they're all running
could have
around
been both. Who knows?
in their underwear, what stood out to me was the fact that they have normal underwear. Her boobs don't suddenly get bigger when all she has on is a bra. Fucking Nancy's wearing comfortable underwear. And women in comics don't really get that. So yeah, I noticed the binder on Ken. I thought it was a bra and I just thought, "Oh, cool." I totally misunderstood that as just he liked feminine clothing. But my attention was completely on the two women and how they looked the same no matter what they were wearing. They weren't overly sexualized. And that was really cool. And the art is really fun. And it makes, it's a comic, so you don't get all the action you normally get. you have to like read and you get the compiles and whatnot. But the way it's drawn makes it clear that it's a lot of fucking high energy going on. That she is really moving throughout this fight, and it's amazing, and I love it. And the lettering, especially on, yes, I did say the jokes were low hanging fruit because a lot of them were puns, and that's not my kind of joke. But you have to pay attention to it if you're going to want to read it, and it's done well. It doesn't feel like it's like just pinned at the bottom of the page trying to interrupt your read of the story if you know what's going on. It's just there in case you want to glance at it. And I really like that. You know more
Erica
about
Henderson, the
yeah, you know more about lettering and art than I do though. So that's just my basic paltry opinion on it.
I mean, you got most of like the big bullet points. I mean, it rocks. Erica Henderson's character designs, her ability to tell a story visually. She like it's popping off. Uh, what is the name of the main letter for a lot of what we're doing is Clayton Cowles. He rocks too. Does his job well. Everything reads it's good. It's clear. The action is fun. The stuff that isn't action is engaging and visually communicated well. And again, like we've been saying, it doesn't look like any other two because it looks like people, and people get to have a lot more
Yes.
diversity of body and face and expression than other comics.
Yes.
And you really,
Exactly.
and and this is, I guess, one of the reasons, among others, I guess, why it's nice to have these older issues in the back. Like, especially at the end of the second volume, when it's much more contemporary comics that are in the back, more contemporary appearances, you get to see, oh yes, here's Erica Henderson's art. Here is something a lot more approximating what like mainstream superhero comic art is, and you see like Squirrel Girl with like the generic pinup body and the skin tight suit with a little bit of fur
Yeah.
over it, and like she's a
Yeah.
child. Why are you drawing her like that? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it makes it visual.
That's part of the
Superheroes have a bit of a
that's
superheroes have a problem, and this book is going to try and fix some of them. We're going to try and see if we can't make good superheroes.
that's part of the reason why I pointed out her interactions with Ben and Tony a lot earlier in the discussion, because again, they point out how she's a child, but they constantly let her do the things they say she can't do because she's a child. She's dressed like an adult. She has the body of an adult in a comic would, when if they're female. But like that's part of the reason why I kept trying to point out her interactions with the grown men around her, because they're weird. The interactions she has with them in the older comics are weird, and that's partly because of how she's dressed. And again because of how they approach her. Like they make it clear she's a child, but then they let her do the things that they're letting the adults do. It's a something.
Do, I guess one last question before we sign off. Do we recommend the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl? Taylor, do you?
I definitely recommend it. There's only really one thing I have an issue with the modern one that not with the old ones. Well, it's in the old ones too. But I wanted more moments of them just at college chilling and talking. I wanted to get more development between her and her other partners, because her and Nancy get a lot. And I'm not complaining about that because I love Nancy. I really do. She's the best character in the series. Fight me on that. I wanted to get more of the four of them bonding and doing classes together, because you get hints at how what a struggle it is to manage superheroing and classes. They all make jokes about it, but you don't really get to see it, and I would have loved to see more of that than the cartoon villain of the week.
So, when I get my hands in the older issues back, and next we meet each other with masks and generally distancing, kids at home,
Yes, yes.
uh, I will I will have to pass along more issues and see if you get a bit more of what you wanted, and some of the later stuff. And obviously, I brought it to the show, so I recommend it. That's a given.
I mean, yeah. Well, there's some things I'm probably going to be bringing to the show that I wouldn't recommend for everybody.
Well, with that being said, and with us a healthy and happy 45 minutes over our original
I
late
told
late
you.
end line,
I told you.
we we've got a lot to learn here.
To be fair, we did
Well,
start late.
I I have been Noah, also known as Hyphen Artist. You're not watching on my channel, probably, but you could be.
And my name is TigerEyes45. Signing off. Have a nice night, everybody. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked our discussions on the Squirrel Girl comics, the few that we were able to read for this episode, please subscribe to support our channel. Likes are wonderful and greatly appreciated too. If you want to see these episodes get made before they go up on YouTube and Spotify, you can find our Twitch channels to the bottom right and in the description below. We record the episode on both channels at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday nights. So, what's your guys' favorite comics? Please feel free to comment below.